Hello, everybody. I'm back. I didn't feel the need to make a, weekly update to Rogue, as a lot of these changes week by week have been pretty small, all things considered. But now that we are entering the beta stage, Subtlety has finally received its rework that it needed. I think it's time to kind of just go down through everything that's changed throughout Alpha and kind of do what I did last time, kind of break things down, how things feel, how things play out, and just kind of like highlight the things that I think suck, highlight the things I think look good, and then yeah. So the first thing I just want to cover is that we're getting some new class talents. The first one is that Shiv is going to be cheaper, lower cooldown, and increased range. Sure. We get some flat agility. Sure. Finisher damage. Again, sure. Chance to partially evade damage, reducing damage by 20%. Again, sure. These are all like pretty okay. These are a lot better than some of the stuff we have in our current tree. And they're removing some talents in Rush Setup and Shadowheart. The only problem is these talents haven't been implemented. So just to kind of show off in Alpha, here is Rush Setup, here is Shadowheart. They still exist. There are no talents that do the things that they've said are going to be changed. These talents seem okay, especially because Rogue class talents are kind of lacking in a lot of ways of just like stuff to spend points on. Like we kind of already get everything that's mostly decent right now when it comes to like sprint duration, feint charges, stealth movement speed, sprint CD. Like we already get a lot of the essential stuff, so these talents are like a welcome addition, but we kind of need them in the game. So the next thing to kind of go over is the tier sets. This is the same for many classes in the game, and it's kind of always been the case in the first tiers of every single expansion, is that the tier sets are kind of a little generic, aren't that exciting, which is totally fine, but it's just a reality of how the game works. So for Assassination, Garrote damage increase and applies weapon poisons, and then Garrote's energy cost is cheaper, deals some more damage. Again, these are kind of generic. It might make stuff like double dose a little bit better, but that's about it. Outlaw's tier set is really focused on Blade Rush. Blade Rush is a really strong button for Outlaw, so I mean, cool. And then for Subtlety Rogue, same kind of deal. Finish your spec, finish your damage. Shadow Blades is a good cooldown. Making it a little bit better is always good. None of these really have any large-scale gameplay implications. They seem pretty decent. So next is some of the new hero talent stuff. Similar to most specs, we're going to get some like generic stuff and hopefully some more involved stuff. So, we got Precise Killer, crit damage bonus. Sure. This is Deathstalker Mark has a 30% chance to immediately consume a stack when applied. This is cool. It adds a little bit of gameplay, a little bit of texture. There's also this one, Bass Casualty, where for Assassination, the Death Mark damage gets spread by your Rupture, and then for Subtlety, it gets spread by Black Powder. Seems pretty good. And then this is just a change to a currently existing talent to balance it with all of the new modifiers that Shadow Strike has. And then we also got the Fatebound and Trickster stuff. So we just got some generic crit chance. We got some easier to match on the flips and just making the coins even better here. And then for Trickster, we have just a generic increase to phased. This one is the tier set from the current tier, which I think is great. It just makes it so that you are proccing your unseen blades and getting coup de grace a little bit faster. And then this one is extremely large for both Outlaw and Subtlety, where something that was annoying with Subtlety is that even if you wanted to press Shuriken Storm in an AoE situation, you kind of couldn't because so much damage was loaded into the hero talent, proccing your unseen blades, cycling to your coups. Now, if you wanted to press Storm, you could. It still might be wrong, but that option is now available. And then same goes for Outlaw, where a lot of the past two tiers, you've been in this awkward situation where you press your killing spree, you now have 2 guaranteed coup procs, but let's say you have opportunity procs, but then you don't want to spend them because then you're not proccing Unseen Blade and then you're wasting them. This talent fixes that entire issue, so like this is a game changer. And then the last general thing that I want to cover before delving into the spec-specific stuff is Deathstalker. It got a bunch of stuff changed. Now, I don't really know what they changed. I tried asking people to explain this to me. I don't really know what this does. But basically, at the end of every conversation, it ended with, it's just better now. So, I guess it's just better now. I don't really know what this means. I've played a lot of Deathstalker, and I tried reading this multiple times and comparing it to the old text. I physically don't understand. Apparently it's going to play better, so W, like, awesome, that's cool, but I just don't understand, sorry. In addition to a lot of changes around Darkest Night got tweaked that I don't really understand, there is a change to Clear the Witness, where Clear the Witness used to be a thing where every time you cycled your Deathstalker mark, your next Fan of Knives dealt bonus damage, or Shuriken Storm also dealt bonus damage. This has just been changed to just generic Fan of Knives and Shuriken Storm damage. I'd say for most people, this is just a W. I mean, if you like the gameplay of having to press Fan of Knives on single target sometimes, that's gone. But it kind of sucked, so I'm kind of glad that's gone personally. So to go over the Assassination Rogue changes specifically, it's the spec that has received the least amount of help, as it didn't really need it. The core of Assassination Rogue, both throughout all of the War Within and now in the alpha and beta for Midnight, the spec kind of just works. As I stated before, the energy is a little bit too high for the whole gameplay of pooling, but in the most recent set of changes, they just nerfed the energy a bunch. So hopefully that goes back in line with their stated goals of pooling. As you can see, there's just been a lot of random nerfs and buffs to stuff, obviously to compensate for new talents and such, where, you know, you have a bunch of talents that buff Envenom, so you should probably lower the base damage of Envenom to compensate. You know, if you're going to make energy worse, you got to make bleeds do a little bit more damage. A lot of this stuff isn't really a big deal, other than the energy nerf, which, again, if the goal is to make pooling relevant, energy regen needs to come down from where it's at on alpha. As I said a little bit earlier, Assassination feels very feature complete for the most part. Again, obviously the energy regen feels a little bit too high, but in terms of just being the simple, apply bleeds, pool for Envenom, do your cooldowns properly spec, it feels pretty solid on alpha and beta during the testing. I don't really have many complaints other than Deathstalker Mark being still a little quirky, even with a lot of the fixes. But yeah, Assassination feels good still. So overall, I feel like Outlaw is in a fairly medium state. I feel like the removal of Crackshot and underhanded upper hand is a net positive for a player like myself. I never really liked that gameplay. I know a lot of people weren't the biggest fan of Vanish being an offensive cooldown, so personally I'm glad a lot of that stuff is gone. But there's still some rough edges when it comes to Outlaw that I feel like haven't fully been addressed yet. So first thing, the big thing that got changed is that Taken by Surprise, the talent that used to be in the bottom right that gave you haste on re-stealth, has been removed and it's been replaced by Preparation. What Preparation does is that when you use it, it immediately resets the cooldown of Adrenaline Rush, Between the Eyes, Blade Flurry, Blade Rush, and Killing Spree on a 4-minute cooldown. This is unaffected by Restless Blades, and I'm not the biggest fan of this talent. So just as a talent, this talent doesn't seem very strong. In a majority of encounters, this is just +1 Adrenaline Rush, Between the Eyes, Blade Flurry, Blade Rush, Killing Spree, which, ironically, does go in line with most of Outlaw's capstones not being that flashy or exciting. The other problem is I don't like the fact that this just doesn't give the spec 2 charges, where this is effectively what the talent does, but it just does it in a little bit of an uglier way, I feel, because you're just incentivized to dump everything, then immediately press Preparation. Meanwhile, a similar type of idea where you can have these charges as like a backup, I feel like just accomplish the same or similar goal and don't just add another button. Another large buff to the spec was melee damage. Now, when I was testing in the alpha, melee damage was really low. It was like 3% to like 5%, which seemed like a bug. But that bug has been fixed, and then auto attack damage was more than doubled in value. Now, while it is the case that when you play well, Adrenaline Rush uptime leads to more auto attack damage, it does feel a little bit weird when you look at the specs breakdown on boss testing, dummy testing, anything. Melee damage is anywhere from your first highest damage to like your third highest damage. Personally, I feel like this is just a tuning dial that's tuned a little bit too high. I feel like melee damage should probably be reduced a little bit from where it's at, but yeah. And then one of the changes that I just straight up don't like, this gets 2 thumbs down, is Deft Maneuvers now also increases the energy cost of Blade Flurry by 30. Now, I've mentioned that energy on alpha feels a little bit worse than it should be. And then this talent just makes energy even worse. I just don't know. Like, it's hard. I'm usually the guy that finds the silver lining in things, but I feel like if you want to make death maneuvers worse, there's got to be a better solution than just making it cost like a mountain of energy when the spec is already a little bit in the struggle department when it comes to energy. And then the last change that we got is a small buff to Gravedigger, where once you've hidden the 6 bullets, your next Between the Eyes consumes them, costs no energy, and generates 6 combo points, and immediately resets its own cooldown. This is just like a small buff. It's going to feel a little bit better to play, and that's about it. So, while Outlaw hasn't received a lot of changes, obviously other than some of the hero talent stuff, one of the things that's becoming a little bit of a problem for the spec is these ugly little 2-pointers that are right here. It's making it really hard to make proper talent builds. So, for example, I just have 4 talent builds right here. We have a keep it rolling single target, keep it rolling AoE, then just like a normal, like no fanciness, and then there's like a trickster setup as well. One of the things you might notice is that every single build is taking 1 ace up your sleeves, because the only thing that scales with a second talent point here is the combo points gained. So instead of gaining 2 combo points, you would gain 4 combo points, but the chance remains the same. These 2 talent points being here makes talent pathing really awkward. And unless this talent also buffs the percent, we're basically always going to be going 1 ace up your sleeves, which I don't think feels great. Now, I don't think the solution is making the percent scale with, a second point. I just think this talent should be a 1-pointer. In addition, this is I think it's like the 3rd time they've tried to nerf this talent where the refund is worse. I feel like they should just bring it back to 5, bro. I don't mind it too much, but I know a lot of people have really strong opinions about having to press a generator after an ace proc. Just make it a 5 and make it a 1-pointer. Another thing that's hard to tell if it's like a bug or intended or whatever is that Zero In is a talent where your auto attack crits, increase the crit chance of your next Between the Eyes by a small percent, stacking up to 20 times. The issue is that when you cast Between the Eyes and it doesn't crit, it wipes your stacks off. When I read this talent initially, I was under the impression that it gave you the crit chance until Between the Eyes crit. But no, if you Between the Eyes and you don't crit, your stacks get wiped. I don't know, like I said, I don't know if this is like a bug or this is like the intended way for the talent to work. This talent really not that good. And then the other problem with it being not that good of a talent is that you have to go it to path to get Fan and Hammer, which is very important. Especially on single target, there's no reason to take Grand Melee. And then if you're not going 2 points into ace up your sleeves, you can't even path through Grand Melee without getting Dancing Steel. So this ties into the issue of these 2-pointers here being really ugly, especially this ace one here. Hopefully this can get addressed sooner rather than later. As stated before, I'm a big fan of the general direction of the spec, but there are some still rough edges. I don't like the nerf to Deft. Making energy an even bigger problem for the spec when I feel like it's a little bit under where a majority of players want it, I don't think is the correct move. And these 2-pointers that exist down here, mainly Ace Up Your Sleeves and Heavy Hitter, these just kind of stink. Mainly Ace Up Your Sleeves, like, thankfully, Heavy Hitter is like an okay talent, and we just take 2 points in it anyway. But Ace Up Your Sleeves being a 2-pointer feels bad for both pathing and as a talent, because playing with 2 combo point Ace Up Your Sleeves definitely gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way. Part of the reason that I didn't want to just record weekly updates was that a lot of the Subtlety Rogue updates seemed very piecemeal and not a bigger picture, as stated in their dev notes. One week we got the Apex talents, then, right here, Ancient Arts. Then on a following week, we got a blue post saying that they are changing Shadow Dance cooldown being proper. And then they also talked about how we do recognize that these are minor changes and do not solve all the problems. So when I read patch notes like these, I don't really have much to say. But now that we have everything kind of all pieced together, we have like a good idea of like what the spec kind of looks like now. So just to cover the hero talent, The hero talent is effectively just Shadowcraft. It's got a lot of text, but it's effectively just Shadowcraft. So on live, just to read what this does, this is, while Symbols of Death is active, your secret techniques trigger 40% more frequently, store combo points, and when you use a finishing move, it refunds your full combo points back. This effectiveness has been removed. It now just stores additional combo points and a little bit more energy, and then the refund effect has been baked into the Apex talent. And then on one of the smaller patch notes that we got, as mentioned earlier, they talked about how these changes obviously aren't enough to fix everything. Stay tuned, just kind of hold your horses. We'll figure it out. They changed how Deepening Shadows worked, where it no longer scales the CDR with haste. It now scales the duration. In addition to that, they lowered the cooldown a bit. They lowered the base duration a little bit, and then they removed the improved Shadow Dance talent. Overall, this kind of creates a similar breakpoint problem that exists with Outlaw and Haste for Adrenaline Rush, where the spec is going to be very binary in a sense, where Haste is going to get value at certain levels, as it's going to give you enough CDR to get extra globals, and any more won't matter until you reach the next second of breakpoint because you can't lower the GCD at all. However, the trade-off is that Bloodlust is going to feel pretty good. I have mixed feelings about this. I don't hate breakpoints that much, but I know some people have really strong opinions on them, especially when it comes to trying to re-gear, or, let's say you're playing Subtlety on one fight and then you're playing Assassination on another, and then it's like, oh shit, now I gotta recraft, I gotta regem just to meet this breakpoint because I want a 7-second dance rather than a 6. But I do like a big dance in Lust. That does sound kind of fun. Hello, this is Forever Guy from the future. As I was editing this, it was brought to my attention that Bloodlust actually doesn't extend the duration of Shadow Dance. It's only actual stats on your character. Trinkets will work, but things like Bloodlust and PI will not. And then just last week, we got a large set of changes. So this is a lot of words. And basically, a lot of this is going to be, random, backstab damage increase, gloom, just a bunch of random stuff. But the real meat and potatoes is that Rupture has been removed from the spec and Symbols of Death has been removed from the spec. And any talent that interacted directly with either Rupture or Symbols of Death has been reworked to accommodate. In addition, a lot of talents have been redesigned to make shadow clones. This is now a shadow clone spec. If we go all the way back to the Apex talent, we see damage attacks that expend shadow techniques to generate combo points of a 15% chance per stack to expend and create a shadow clone that repeats the same attack. And then if we go all the way back down to the bulk of the Subtlety row changes, we have Weapon Master, Backstab and Shadow Strike have a 15% chance to create a shadow clone. We have down here Replicating Shadows. This is shadow clones deal increased damage, and they're more likely to occur from all effects that create it. Shuriken Tornado has been redesigned again to now cause a Shuriken Storm to create a clone. So the spec has been sort of remolded to be about making shadow clones, which is kind of fun. And then with the focus that the spec has on shadow clones, they did improve the visuals. Now, at the end of the day, we are not a Demo Warlock. We are not a Ret Paladin. We are not shooting holy laser beams that, we're not shooting giant shit. But they did add a small tint to the clones that the spec creates through Secret Technique, the Weapon Master stuff, where it does just look a little bit more distinct now. If I just do the opener here without the UI, hopefully you can see what the visuals look like now. As you can see, they have a more of a flashy, light pink hue to them anytime you create these clones. See if I can get a few more just to kind of show off. Getting a few less procs than I want to kind of showcase this, but you kind of get the idea, is they have a now pink outline to them to further highlight how they look. I think it looks kind of cool. I think it could be a little bit more distinct. But this is definitely better than, what we've had for a long time, for it just being kind of like a purple fart for a long time. Some awkward stuff mentioned in the previous video about how Dark Shadow doesn't increase your Shuriken Storm damage, so it doesn't really do anything in AoE, has been fixed by re-adding the generic flat damage, where Shadow Dance increases all ability damage by 5 to 10%, and then Shadow Strike by an additional amount. Secret Technique has also been just made baseline. It's no longer a talent, to really solidify that that's kind of like the pillar of the spec and not just like a talent that you take. Another thing that doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere in this post here is that Shadow Blades has been reverted to how it used to be before the Dragonflight rework, where Shadow Blades now cause your generators to generate double combo points rather than generate full combo points. This should hopefully stop a lot of the dumb stuff related to Backstab or Shuriken Storm in Blades. You know, it's just to iron out some of the quirks. At the end of the day, Shadow Strike is going to fill your combo point bar. So while a lot of the sub stuff is pretty good, there is still some rough edges. The fact that Secret Technique still scales with haste, it feels a little bit weird. If again, when I was just doing my beta rate testing, I didn't have exact mathed out haste breakpoints, so it always felt like a little awkward to line up Shadow Dance with Secret Technique. Hopefully that gets addressed in future patches. As they said, we hope you enjoy Subtlety and Midnight Beta and look forward to receiving community feedback that will continue informing iterative improvements. So hopefully this feedback reaches them. You know, like I said, some of the cooldown stuff still doesn't work. I know Shadow Blades is bugged. There is also a not yet implemented talent right here under construction, so hopefully that's cool. Similar to the other specs, I feel like the foundation's really good now. Just gotta sand down the rough edges now. So overall, I feel like the vibes in Rogueville are immaculate, okay? I think Assassination feels amazing. Obviously, said before, the energy is a little bit too high, but the return to pooling that's what I like, okay? Not a lot has changed, but, you know, you don't need to change perfection. Outlaw, still, I would say Outlaw is now the most rough spec. Please give us a little bit more energy and get rid of these, like, ugly little 2-pointers that are around the tree. That's my biggest point of feedback. And then when it comes to Subtlety, I feel like just some of the cooldown sequencing is still a little bit awkward, mainly around the weird haste relationship that Secret Technique and Shadow Dance now have. Hopefully that gets looked at. But overall, I think the vibes are great. Now, while it is true, some people are not going to like the new version of Outlaw, as it is no longer centralized around a very fun talent for a lot of people, and Subtlety Rogue has been made a little bit simpler in a few ways, relating to, you know, you don't need to maintain your Rupture in AoE, or like you don't need to sequence your flag stuff as tightly anymore, because flag's obviously gone. Your cooldown sequencing is a little bit less strict. I think the overall shell of a lot of these specs is still really fun. I will say, if you hop on beta and you don't like the general foundations of the specs, you're probably not going to like them. And a lot of the changes from here on out are probably not going to change your opinion in a very strong way, unless your problems are very, you know, rough edges type stuff similar to me. But if you hop on and you like how the specs feel, I feel like Midnight's going to be a blast. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So, you know, as always, more big changes come, I'll make a video, okay? But, you know, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment. I need to farm those engagement metrics. So thanks everybody for watching and making it this far. You know, much love.